She said it like it was nothing, a joke for everyone to laugh at. My life, my sacrifices, the years I spent holding things together? All this, it was the night my sister looked me dead in the eyes, her voice light and mocking as she called me the safe one. Something inside me broke that night. Not in an angry, fiery way, no, it was a different kind of break, the kind that's quieter, deeper. A kind of silence I had never experienced before. Not angry. Not surprised. Just done. Missed in that one careless word. And it wasn't just her. Everyone laughed along, even my mother. It was the kind of laugh that spoke volumes. The kind that told you they had already written your story without ever asking what it cost you to survive it. There I was, standing there, holding a glass, as I felt the weight of every time I had swallowed my pride. Every moment I had let them believe I was okay with being the background to their spotlight. For years I thought that if I stayed quiet and kept the peace, it meant I was doing the right thing. But that night, I learned that silence doesn't make you noble, just makes you invisible. And that's when I decided no more. No more waiting for them to see me. And they have no idea what's coming next. Before I continue, please subscribe and like this video, and listen to my story until the end. Let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. As I flew over the mountain ranges, the cold wind outside scraping against the cockpit glass, I couldn't shake off the tension that had taken root inside me. The helicopter's hum was the only thing I could hear, fading into a quiet buzz, like the world itself had decided to wait. By the time I landed at the San Diego base, the sun was already gone, swallowed whole by the horizon. The storm from the northern border had finally started to die, leaving behind silence and wreckage. But some things couldn't be fixed with time. I remember the faces of those I'd saved. Faces that looked at me like I wasn't real, like I was just a blur between them and the chaos. As I pulled off my helmet, I could feel the sting of oil and salt on my skin. Every mission, no matter how hard, ended the same way. Not with pride or triumph, but with this strange emptiness. Like a stillness that's too clean, almost painful. You know, that kind of silence that follows thunder. My phone buzzed on the console as I was lost in thought. The message was short, polite, and cold. Clarissa's engagement dinner next week. No uniform this time, it said. No greeting, no warmth, just instruction. As if what I wore mattered more than what I'd done. I leaned back, staring at the message as the words blurred in the reflection of the windshield. Outside, the sky had turned this deep metallic violet. The kind of color that felt like it belonged between endings and beginnings. Funny, isn't it? How people measure your life in ways that they never care to understand. I drove away from the base, the runway lights fading in the rearview mirror. My mind already shifting to the next storm. Montana was waiting. And it wasn't just the cold I was dreading. It was everything that came with it. Another mission. Another fight through the winds. I could feel it in my bones. Before I get into the next part of my journey, I want to hear from you. If you've ever felt invisible, like your choices and sacrifices didn't matter, share your thoughts with me in the comments. Have you ever felt like your life was just a backdrop to someone else's story? What did you do about it? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. Now let's continue. But little did I know Montana would be more than just a storm I had to fly through. It was about to turn everything upside down. Stay tuned for part 2, where the real battle begins, and I realized just how much I've been avoiding my own truth. Montana was as cold as I had remembered, but not in a way that made you want to seek warmth. No, this was a cold that cut deep into your bones, into your very soul. It was the kind of cold that told you that no matter how many layers you put on, it wouldn't be enough to shield you from the truth you were trying so desperately to bury. I pulled up to my mother's house, the one that used to be full of life, full of sound. Now it felt hollow. The snow had buried the fences, and the house glowed under a white blanket like something out of a dream, new, polished, nothing like the one my father had built. The moment I stepped inside, the air hit me like a wave. A mix of lavender candles and something synthetic. The kind of scent that tried too hard to be elegant. I didn't have to look to know it was her. Clarissa appeared at the end of the hall, all perfume and practiced perfection. Her smile more like a mask than anything real. She hugged me tightly, camera ready, even in her own living room. Her words spilled out like they always did, filling every gap in the conversation like she was afraid of silence. She talked about Nathan, how he was a SEAL, how he had served in Yemen. She said the word SEAL like it was some kind of holy title, an invisible crown. I smiled, polite. That's all I could do. Then my mother came in, hair fixed, pearls gleaming, all control and perfection. She looked at me like she was inspecting my uniform before a high school competition, searching for any imperfections. "Still doing those rescue things?" she asked, her voice smooth, her eyes sharp. "You look tired, dear." I told her I was doing what I knew best. The words fell flat between us. It didn't matter. Dinner that night was perfect, under soft yellow lights that made everything feel too staged. Clarissa talked about the wedding venues, menus, and Nathan's charm. My mother nodded, her eyes glowing every time the word stability was mentioned, as if it was a hymn she couldn't stop herself from praising. But then there was that look. A look I'd seen too many times before. The way my mother's eyes drifted to me when she said the word successful, as if I were the opposite of that. The opposite of everything they wanted me to be. It didn't matter what I'd done. It didn't matter how many lives I had saved. When the meal ended, I stepped outside onto the porch, the cold air slicing through me. I breathed in deeply, feeling the sting of the winter night on my skin. The moonlight burned across the snow, so bright it almost hurt to look at. I whispered into the stillness, half to myself, half to the sky. Maybe my mother was right. Some people are built for calm. I just never was. Before we move on, I need to know, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like nothing you did could ever measure up? Like no matter how hard you tried, you were always invisible? Leave me a comment and share your experience. We're in this together. We all have those moments when we feel like we're trapped in someone else's narrative. But guess what? We're the ones who get to rewrite it. So tell me, have you ever felt like you had to live someone else's dream instead of your own? Let's talk about it in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The next day, things were going to change. But the hardest part wasn't facing the mission. No, it was facing the person I had been ignoring for years, myself. Stay tuned for part 3, where I finally stand up for who I am, no matter the cost. The next morning brought with it the kind of laughter that echoed through the walls, so bright and cheerful it felt like a slap in the face. Clarissa was on a video call with Nathan, her words filled with excitement, the kind that made it sound like the world revolved around her. I couldn't help but watch the image of Nathan filling the tablet screen. His square jaw, steady eyes, the kind of man who had never been told no. And yet, there he was, smiling politely at me when Clarissa turned the camera my way. He said he'd heard I flew helicopters. "That's brave," he said. His words felt like a compliment, but they landed wrong. "It wasn't the usual thing for women," he said. That line hit hard. I wasn't sure if he meant it the way it sounded, but it didn't matter. It was clear that to him I was an anomaly, something out of place. Clarissa didn't even notice. She moved on to the next subject, her voice all sunshine and pride, as though she hadn't just thrown a small knife into me. Dinner that night felt like a performance I was forced to sit through. My mother had invited a group of old friends, mostly retired officers and their wives. They spoke in soft, rehearsed tones, and I was supposed to fit into their world. But it was impossible. They asked me what I did, and when I told them I was in Air Force search and rescue, one of the women laughed and asked if I taught swimming or handled the paperwork. The others joined in, a soft, synchronized laugh that stung more than I wanted to admit. I didn't respond right away. I just smiled, polite. I said, "Neither. I fly people back home." The table went silent. Clarissa, of course, broke the silence with a laugh too loud for the room, calling me dramatic, as if my life was just something to joke about. I kept eating, my fork steady against the plate, but inside me something began to stir. A small vibration, familiar, like the hum of a rotor cutting through wind. Later in my room I watched the snow falling outside. The world outside looked so peaceful, like it had been covered with a perfect soft blanket. But I knew better. Snow hides everything, every flaw, every scar, everything that needs to be seen. And I wasn't going to be the one who stayed hidden anymore. I had spent years letting everyone think they had the right to define me, to dictate my worth, my role. But I was tired. So tired. I had to stop pretending to be what they wanted me to be. And that night, as I stood by the window, I knew I had to start living for myself. Before I move on, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a place where you felt like your entire life was being reduced to something others could laugh about? How did you find the strength to stand up? I want to hear your story. Leave a comment and let me know. We all have moments when we're made to feel smaller than we are. But it's in those moments that we realize just how powerful we really are. So tell me, have you ever felt dismissed by someone who didn't understand your journey? How did you take control of your story? Let's talk about it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The night was only getting started, and I knew that things were about to escalate. The storm wasn't just out there in the weather, it was coming from within. Stay tuned for part 4, where everything I've been avoiding comes crashing down, and I'm forced to face it head-on. The night felt like it was dragging on forever. As the engagement party continued, the laughter and clinking glasses seemed so foreign to me, like I was watching someone else's life unfold in front of me. Crystal glasses shimmered in the light, jazz music whispered through the speakers, and the sound of heels tapping across polished floors seemed to echo in my chest, reminding me of everything I wasn't. Clarissa's engagement party was a picture-perfect scene, a snapshot of a life I had never been invited to live. I stood on the edge of it all, the only one not wrapped in pastel silk, feeling like a shadow among their light. My mother drifted over to me, her perfume sharp, her smile just soft enough to sting. She told me to smile more. "People are watching," she said. I nodded, but I didn't agree. I was used to being watched, just not in the way she thought. People watched me to make sure I didn't fall. They expected me to stay in the background, quiet, out of the spotlight, never making waves. Then, like the performance it was, Clarissa and Nathan stepped under the chandelier. Perfect posture. Perfect couple. Nathan started to speak about his mission in Yemen. His voice steady, humble, just the right amount of modesty. He talked about a pilot who had redirected his team through a sandstorm, saving their lives. He didn't name her. He didn't need to, in his mind. But I knew. The details were wrong. He said the wind had shifted north. I remembered it clearly. It was east. Heading 142. Without thinking, my hand tightened around the glass in my hand, and before I could stop myself, the words came out. It wasn't north wind, Captain, it was east. That's how you made it out. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. Nathan froze. Slowly, his eyes met mine, recognition flickering in his gaze. "You were there," he said, his voice dropping low. I nodded, the weight of the truth heavy on my chest. "I gave that order." Nathan straightened, his expression shifting. And then slowly he saluted me. "Major Miller." The moment stretched on, thick and heavy, as though time had decided to pause just to witness it. A few SEALs who were standing nearby followed suit and saluted too. And in that silence, that heavy, stifling silence, I felt it. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her glass. Clarissa's mouth opened, but no words came out. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. The message title froze me. Suspension notice. Unauthorized mission decision. Immediate effect. All the respect, all the admiration collapsed in an instant like a house of cards. One vibration. Clarissa hissed. "What did you do?" "My job," I replied quietly. But before she could say anything else, my mother's voice cut through, low and sharp. "Couldn't you let your sister have one night?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "You taught me to save lives," I said. "Tonight was one of them." Then without another word, I turned and walked out. The cold air outside sliced through me like a blade. The snow was falling heavier now, drifting beyond the glass walls of the lodge. I could feel the weight of everything, the weight of the decision, the weight of the life I'd chosen. Behind me, the laughter started again, perfectly in tune, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I climbed into my car, my hands still shaking, and drove away from the lodge. The headlights carved through the white haze of snow, the road disappearing beneath the thick veil of winter. Another buzz. Another message. "Clarissa." Embarrassed. "You always ruin things." I didn't reply. The wind slammed against the windshield like a voice that wouldn't stop shouting. The radio crackled with static, and for a second I thought I heard the same command I had given that night in Yemen. "Proceed 142. I closed my eyes for a moment, the memory flooding back. The storm, the heat, the impossible decisions. I had saved them, and now it was a crime. Then the phone rang again. "Nathan." I ignored it twice before answering. His voice was fast, frantic. "They're saying you disobeyed command. It's not true, is it?" I hesitated. "My father's behind it," I said. Of course he was. Rear Admiral Thornton. The source of the storm had a name. I hung up and sat in the dark, the engine humming steadily, my breath fogging up the glass. Outside, the snow was blinding, and inside I knew I had to face the truth. The storm wasn't just out there. It was here. And it was coming for me. Tell me in the comments, has there been a moment when doing the right thing made you the enemy? When you stood up for what you believed in, but it felt like you were the only one who saw it that way? Share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Have you ever felt the weight of doing what's right, even when it means going against everything and everyone you love? How did you find the strength to stay true to yourself? Let's talk about it in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. The storm was only just beginning, and I was about to be tested in ways I never imagined. Stay tuned for the final part, where I face my greatest challenge yet, and the truth comes to light in a way no one could have predicted. 3 days after Clarissa's engagement, the official order came through. Return to base for inquiry. I landed in San Diego with my stomach in knots. The sky overhead was too clear, too bright, that piercing blue that makes everything look surreal. I stepped off the transport, the weight of everything pressing on my shoulders, and as I walked across the tarmac, I could feel the eyes of the officers waiting for me. They were standing in line, their faces unreadable, just a sealed envelope between them and me. There was no salute, no words of respect, just the cold certainty that this moment was only the beginning of the end. By order of Rear Admiral Thornton, my command was suspended pending investigation. I signed the papers without saying a word. In the military, silence is often the only thing you can truly own, and in that moment I held on to it tightly. By nightfall, the story was everywhere. Headlines screamed at me from every screen: Air Force Major under review for reckless decision during Yemen operation. My inbox was flooded with sympathy emails, questions, and speculation. "Are you okay? What happened?" And then the one from my mother. "Couldn't you wait until after the wedding to start this drama?" I read it once, then deleted it. I wouldn't let myself be consumed by that anymore. They had their version of me, but it wasn't the truth. At the base, Colonel Evans was waiting for me in a quiet conference room. His silver hair gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, his expression both sad and proud as he told me, "They're turning you into a lesson, not a criminal. That's how command covers its mistakes." I didn't respond. What else was there to say? He handed me a folder. Inside were radar logs, proving my order to change the heading had been confirmed before the transmission failed. But the signature that followed it had been replaced. By the Admiral's office. My heart sank, but I didn't show it. I stood up, nodded, and walked out, leaving the sterile hallway behind. 2 young soldiers were standing by the vending machine, whispering. One of them said, "She's the reckless one from Yemen." The other called it a shame. I kept walking, my eyes forward. Once I had saved men like them. Now I was the stain on their uniforms. That night, my phone rang from an unknown number. A low metallic voice came through, almost too quiet to hear. "Walk away, Major. Let it fade. Stay and you'll lose your wings." I asked who it was. The voice replied, "Someone who knows when to stop flying." I didn't need to hear more. I knew what was happening. They wanted me to fold, to fall in line, to become part of the lie. But I wasn't going to let them. I hung up, stared out at the dark corridor, and knew that I had to keep going. The next morning, the sun barely broke over Washington as I stood before the brass. The Pentagon's glass windows mirrored the gray steel sky, reflecting the chill that had settled into my bones. Colonel Evans met me outside the briefing room. He handed me a thin envelope. Inside was the original transmission. Proceed 142 confirmed. Evans said, "Keep it close. They'll call it forged. Let them prove it." I nodded, pocketing the envelope, and walked into the room. The generals were seated at the head of the table. Rear Admiral Thornton sat at the center, flanked by 2 generals. He looked like a man who had already decided my fate. He began reading the charges with that calm, practiced voice of his. "You changed heading without clearance. 6 million in federal loss. Do you admit it? I looked him dead in the eyes. No, sir. The wind shifted southeast at 2017. My decision saved 6 men. Thornton leaned back, his expression unreadable. That's a serious accusation. I pressed on, my voice steady. So is falsifying evidence. The room went deathly still. One of the officers cleared his throat, then asked, "Who can confirm your version?" "Captain Nathan Cole," I said. He was there. The name landed with a thud, the room's energy shifting immediately. Thornton's jaw tightened. My son's loyalty won't be used against me. I didn't flinch. Then let him choose what loyalty means. The session was adjourned for a recess. I stepped out into the corridor, my heart pounding. As I walked, I saw Nathan standing there, waiting. His eyes were tired, his shoulders tense. He looked like a man who had already lost everything. "You knew he was my father," Nathan said, his voice low. I nodded. "I guessed he'll destroy you." Nathan told me he had asked to testify, but they denied him. "Then testify outside." I told him, my voice firm. The truth doesn't belong to anyone in that room. Back in my hotel that night, the wind howled against the window, a rhythm too familiar to mistake. I opened my laptop, pressing play on the recording Evans had given me. Proceed 142 confirmed. I listened to it again and again, my heart pounding with every word. The sound of the storm, the wind, the voice, his voice giving the order. It was the truth, and I wasn't going to let anyone bury it. Tomorrow the battle wouldn't just be about wind or noise. It would be war. And this time I wasn't the one under command. Tell me in the comments, has there ever been a time when you had to fight for the truth, even when everyone else was against you? When you stood your ground, even when it felt like the world was trying to break you? You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a fight for something bigger than yourself? How did you handle it when everything seemed to be crashing down? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The battle wasn't over, and the truth was still out there. But one thing was certain. No matter how hard they tried to bury it, I would rise. Stay tuned for the final chapter where everything changes, and I walk away not as a victim, but as a survivor.